Welcome to my channel. I'm Nicole, and if you're new here, which you all will be because I have a new YouTube channel, you've stumbled on my Watch With Me series where I deep dive into a film, and it would mean so much if you would like, share, and subscribe. Today I'm going to be looking at the horror film The Rule of Jenny Penn, which stars Geoffrey Rush and John Lithgow and is filmed in New Zealand. Now, you might not know this, but I live in New Zealand. I had heard of this film, but I actually didn't know it was filmed in New Zealand. And as it turns out, it's also written by a New Zealand author. So it's based on a short story in a series of short stories written by Owen Marshall. Marshall also wrote Coming Home in the Dark, which they did also make into a film, which is absolutely terrifying. I think what it is just the ruthlessness of the characters in there. And so the author definitely has an eye for the raw parts of humanity, I would say. The Rule of Jenny Penn definitely deals with that. If you don't want any spoilers, I suggest you go watch the film and then come back because this is going to be a very spoiler heavy video. And I think that that's kind of like the purpose of these videos, is that we do watch them together. So you watch it and then watch the review. It's not really like a what you need to know before you watch the film kind of a video. I want us to kind of like experience it together rather than me tell you what you would see, because there's plenty of other people who are doing videos with like reviews so that you know what to expect, whereas this one I kind of want to like talk about it afterwards, and just see how you feel about it. As I build a community, you can kind of give me that feedback. How did you like that film? And until then, I can just say what I feel about it, and have kind of an ongoing conversation as this series develops. I just want to give some content warnings because this is a horror film, more like a thriller, I would say, but it does deal with violence and with death and really psychologically difficult topics, and that includes the topic of SA. So if you can't watch SA, then I would maybe not, I would skip this one. So the film I'm going to be looking at today, The Rule of Jenny Penn. Geoffrey Rush is a judge, and then within like the first minute of the movie, you see the New Zealand emblem, and that is actually where I learned that it was a New Zealand film. I was surprised. Actually, no. In the opening credits, it said on screen or something, and I was like, wait a minute. I know what that is. What are we doing? How did I miss it? This was New Zealand. I guess I didn't expect this to be a New Zealand film. I think that because I live in New Zealand and I've lived here for so long, I do have a little bit of a different take on the film than a lot of other people would have. I do think that there's a lot of cultural nuance to the film, kind of social commentary that maybe you miss if you aren't super familiar with New Zealand. And I don't mean as like a tourist, I mean like as part of the culture. So, about the film follows the experiences of a New Zealand judge who is played by Geoffrey Rush, who suffers a stroke and is forced to recover in a care facility. As the film goes on, it appears that it might not actually be a stroke recovery facility that he is in, and more possibly a retirement home or even a dementia ward. I honestly did not do any research to find out whether or not this is supposed to be all of the above, but there is some sort of a hint that maybe he thinks that he's there to recover from the stroke. There's another character who thinks that she's there to wait for her family to return from their holiday. That, to me, is a little bit of a mirror back to his actual experience. So he's looking at her like, hey, lady, your family, they aren't coming. She keeps saying, oh, they're going to be back right after Christmas. And he tells her it's October. They're not coming. He's kind of being cruel to her, not letting her down lightly. Whereas his own situation, he's there to recover from a stroke. And he keeps saying, like, you know, when my legs are working, then I'm going to get out of here. They don't typically put you in a home if your legs aren't working, unless he was in a position where he just had no other support, I suppose. It just doesn't seem to me like that is where he would have ended up if he suffered a stroke. It just seems to me that he doesn't realize the situation he's in. They are trying to help him recover from the stroke. You can see that the people who surround him might have dementia or other issues that would require them to have more ongoing care. It is interesting that in the early part of the film, the door is open. You know, they have swipe cards to be able to go in and out of this hospital. They seem to be alone all the time. When Geoffrey Rush tries to leave the building the first time, his swipe card doesn't work. And so he goes to a different door, and that door is just open. He goes out there and he speaks with a man who is smoking cigarettes. There's no one around them. There's no one tending to them. And a lot of these people, they do appear to have dementia or need that kind of more monitored kind of care. So it really struck me just kind of the lack of staff that were around. I did hear someone else say that they thought it was because there wasn't enough funding for the facility. To me, that's not what I saw. Uh, it kind of spoke to what can be negligence in a care facility. I felt that a lot of the way that this when the staff were there, they spoke to them like they had no agency. They just didn't put any weight behind what they said. It was as if they were no longer human. What they say and they want and they experience, they just brush it off. No one believed Jeffrey Rush when John Lithgow started attacking him. They just kind of brushed it off. And I guess that what we were witnessing was Jeffrey learning what it's like to be have your agency removed, which I guess is kind of what he was doing when he was putting people in prison. You no longer have your agency. He is kind of in a prison in this facility. I mean, there's a gate. We see at some point in the film that that door can open really easily. Just open the gate. But why is it that that's easily opened? Where are the staff? Where are the night staff? Why is John Lithgow able to just run amok in the facility? And I think what it is that it's really just emphasizing just how alone they are in the facility with their illness, whether or not that's dementia or recovering from stroke. They're all sort of isolated. The people who are there to help them aren't actually helping them. And when there is a really big issue, it's almost like they're not believed when people start saying anything about John Lithgow. And whether or not that's because the staff have learned that it's better just to let him do it, or if they just don't believe people because maybe they do have dementia. When Jeffrey Rush starts to complain to the staff at the care facility, they don't seem to believe him. What happens when someone with dementia does have a real problem and they're asking for help and nobody believes them? What happens then? And I think that that's what this film is pointing out. Just kind of like that uncomfortable in between spot where, yes, you might have an illness that prevents you from being able to see reality quite the same. Maybe you say things that you don't mean because of your illness, and instead of taking the time to like listen to it and evaluate what is true and what is not and to help where you can, it's like the staff just shut it off and there's no support. It's like they just blanket everything. You're all like this. It's interesting because it's like his experience in the care facility mirrors the experiences of the people that he was, judging in court. There's a moment where someone says, "Oh, this guy, one of the characters in the care facility, he is an All Black, which is a rugby team, in case you don't know." And he says something about he has experience with rugby players, but only in SA situations in court. That blanket like judgment that he has for all rugby players and just kind of the hostile tone that he has when he's talking about them is a stereotype, and it is not fair for the person who he then later in the film ends up relying on. They support each other and they are both being abused by John Lithgow's character. It's like he's being confronted with all his judgments and the circumstances are turned on him. He is the one who is helpless now. He is the one who is at the mercy of someone else. Technically, he's at the mercy of the care facility and his own debilitation because of his stroke. His body doesn't work properly anymore. He is also at the mercy of John Lithgow, who is now the boss. Jenny Penn is the boss. Jenny Penn represents something. I actually don't know what Jenny Penn represents. I did do some Googling and I couldn't figure it out. So I would love if you did know what Jenny Penn represents to put it in the comments. That would mean a lot, and we can kind of grow a community around like giving feedback to each other. Jenny Penn is a fictionalized character that a psychopath in the care facility who is running amok is creating. Jenny Penn is the boss, and it is abusive the way that John Lithgow makes people bow down to Jenny Penn. He abuses them, he emotionally abuses them, he physically abuses them, and it's quite disturbing to watch if that is difficult for you. I'm pretty good with horror movies, but something really like psychological about the way he just makes everyone bow down to him that is a little bit more disturbing than just like a movie that is a fake horror. I saw in John Lithgow's character when he was abusing them things that I've seen in people the like need for power and the need for people to be under him. If you've ever met a really terrible person, you can see flashes of that stuff sometimes. There's something really like normal about power struggles and power dynamics and someone wanting to be the boss and kind of bullying everyone in the rest home. It's not clear at first that everyone doesn't know that he's a bad person. So at first it seems a little bit like people aren't well and so they're not able to see that John Lithgow is doing all this, or maybe he's just targeting certain people and not everyone. But we see later in the film that he is targeting everyone. It's just that people have learned to shut their mouth. They've learned to put their head down and ignore it and to just let him go at whoever he wants to go at, because then maybe he'll leave them alone. But that's not true, because when you turn a blind eye to something horrible like that, you can get caught up in it. You don't know when it's your time. Just the same as the lady who was saying that she was waiting for her family to come back. John Lithgow lets her out. He opens the gate and sends her to her death because she's not able to take care of herself. I don't think that she was one of the characters who could have stopped it, but she was maybe being left alone by him for a while and then suddenly wasn't. And that can happen to anyone when you turn a blind eye to bad behavior and tyranny. And yeah, she suffered, and he went out looking for her so he could get her swipe card. And that's all he wanted. He didn't care for her life. And I guess there was like a ruling the roost kind of a vibe that he carried with him throughout the whole thing. Now, I want to talk about some of the New Zealand specific stuff I said I would. I am Kiwi. I'm a citizen here, and I've lived here 20 years. I'm very immersed in the culture. I still learn new things all the time, though. I didn't grow up here, but I go in houses. I have friends. I had family here. And one of the things that strikes me is the racist comments that John Lithgow makes about Maori people. And I kind of didn't want to brush it off as like he's being funny and he's just a funny guy, because that is actually more of a problem in New Zealand. There is obviously a colonization issue that we have where people did come here and take land unfairly that wasn't theirs to have, and it was never seceded to them. And so there's still racism around Maori people, and the Pakeha people, which are the Pakeha are the people who have come to New Zealand who aren't Maori. And the things that he's saying about the racist jokes he was making, that is actually more common than I think that maybe people know. And I mean, obviously, not everyone does that. That's not a Kiwi trait. People aren't just making racist jokes. But it is shocking how normalized it can be sometimes when someone makes a comment and nobody around them says anything. And I think that like that does kind of feed into this like John Lithgow's character. He said this thing, he's saying all these racist things and nobody's saying anything about it. But in addition to that, he's also abusing everyone and nobody's saying anything about it. He's just getting away with everything. It's just like, it's almost like a commentary on the social world here. I was thinking about the inhaler situation. I think I'm going to make a video on the housing in New Zealand at some point, but housing in New Zealand isn't so good, and I don't want to get into it too deep right now, but housing in New Zealand causes a lot of asthma problems, and I kind of wondered if that was the subtext of the inhaler. There is a lot of asthma here, and it is because of the bad housing. It's a problem, and it's a known problem. I saw that as commentary on like the housing and maybe even like the quality of care that they're getting in that facility. Is there mold in that facility? There's no staff around. Like, well, there's mold in New Zealand housing. Like, it's quite common. And I did really think about the film as like commentary on compassion for aging people. I felt really confronted with the idea of going to a retirement home myself. I mean, I've had family members in retirement homes, and you care about how they're doing. And that film just showed like the absence of family. There was just no one visiting, no staff. It was very much like you were alone. And some of the transitions that were being made in the filming, like Jeffrey Rush was suddenly aware that he was being removed by John Lithgow at some point. It's like you're in their mind, and you don't realize that you're almost experiencing the dementia with them because of the way they've filmed it. You think you're with that character experiencing one thing, and then they open their eyes and they're in a wheelchair being pushed somewhere else by the villain. I think that the death in the beginning of the film really sets up the lawlessness of the care facility, just that someone could be alone like that and burned alive and nobody even noticed. And, Jeffrey Rush was very helpless. He didn't have the physical ability to go and save that person. Where were the staff? Where were the cameras? That stuff is usually monitored. Where are people? I also found it difficult to know whether or not the other staff, when you did see them, whether or not they were kind of in on it with John Lithgow. I know that he was hiding from them on the way out of the elevator, but it kind of gave me the feeling of like they just knew he did that. Where's that room he went off to? He was just kind of always exploring, and I wondered it was because he was a staff member there. Was he a staff member, or was he like just in the facility the whole time? I don't know. I thought he was a staff member. I'm just thinking of those photos where Jeffrey Rush had gone through and was looking at all those photos and saw John Lithgow in all the photos, and I guess I thought that that meant he was a staff member, but maybe he was in the care facility since he was younger and he's just really disturbed. And then that's the question, is like, if that were the case, please tell me if you think that's wrong. If that is the case, then like, why are they combining these two situations? I don't know. And I did notice that every time Jeffrey Rush was defending himself against John Lithgow, that the staff just suddenly appeared. The staff are never there until Jeffrey Rush just tries to defend himself, and then suddenly they're there and they stop him, and nobody speaks up and says, yes, John Lithgow is doing this, and Jeffrey's just left alone because he's just not being supported. I felt like there were systemic issues of SA being expressed within the care facility. So, like, how he was just helpless to the system while he was in the care facility is, to me, was mirroring the situation of his job as a judge and the helplessness that maybe people experience um, in going through the courts and stuff with SA. And so he's almost like experiencing the other side of that. And just the who rules Jen Penn does, that that was just like, I would like to talk more about that. I don't know if that was anything but just disturbing. Like, what do you think of that? It's just a power grab. So also one of the parts that was very New Zealand culturally was the haka, and where he stood up and did the haka, the rugby player. And I think that, you can Google what the haka is, and you can have seen it in rugby or whatever. You can have heard about it. Maybe you came to New Zealand and saw it. To live in New Zealand and to know what the haka is, to stand up like that and to do the haka, he was actually really displaying his power in front of him. So he really gave it like his power to stand up to John Lithgow in that moment really is palpable. It's not just like he's doing a war cry or whatever I've seen other people say. He's actually challenging him and threatening him and showing his power and showing that he is strong. And it was really powerful. And I do think that that was something that is maybe easily missed, but definitely shows also like the colonization aspect. Like, he is reclaiming his power. This guy with the puppet is just suppressing him. And I do find it ironic and telling that Jeffrey Rush said that, the rugby player, oh, they're always like part of SA. So that's how come I know them. In reality, in the rugby player's experience, he was being assaulted by John Lithgow. It's not that straightforward. And as a judge, he should obviously like hear people's true experiences before making judgment. And it just kind of showed like how he turned that off, his care in a way. Also, I noticed that at the end of the film, when they were burning the puppet, like no one was around. Nobody noticed that puppet was on fire at the end. Like, those guys are just on their own. Nobody's taking care of them whatsoever. And like, what happened when that lady vanished into the woods? Did anyone notice? Nobody came and asked or anything. It is truly a bizarre place. But it also kind of shows just like that they don't care about the people who live there. I have a real interest in what happens with people's agency when they get dementia, and do they still have agency and how do you deal with it? And I think that this movie just really explored that really well. I don't think that it provided any answers, and I certainly don't think I have any answers, but it definitely looked at it and made you feel. I really felt for all of them. I thought it was a really well made film, and I'm really proud that it's a New Zealand film. I do feel that it really emphasized that, like, no one cares about the elderly. Not having anyone there to visit them was just kind of like, there are other ways that people deal with dementia, but we saw one side of it and we saw the worst side of it. And people with dementia, they still experience their own world. And that is definitely what we saw with this film. We saw the world that they experienced. It wasn't a maybe an accurate way that people experience the world because of how hostile it was, but they still have their own world and they still have their own rights. And I mean, there was that scene with that woman who John Lithgow was trying to essay, and it was really disturbing to watch. And you could tell that she just was absolutely not okay with it, and no one in that room was okay with it. And she's still human and she still has choices. And it's like there were no choices available for her. And I'm not just talking about with the SA situation, but like the care facility. It's like they stripped them of their autonomy and their agency, and they just were they're living out the rest of their days. It was really confronting. It was really confronting. So they've done a great job with that. Also, I noticed that when the lady went outside and she was in the woods, where is that? Like, that's not Wellington. I know that they filmed it in like Taupo and the Hut and Wellington, which is the Hut and Wellington are kind of basically Wellington. Taupo is up north, quite far away from here. But like, I noticed that they said that the care facility was in Wellington. When that lady just like wandered off into the woods, I was like, where is she? Just drowned in a puddle and nobody noticed. And I mean, I know it's fiction, but I was like, this isn't Wellington. This isn't the Hut. Where are you? Oh, and also, I really felt that maybe like Lithgow's power over all of the people is like the visible representation of the power that the care facility has over the people. Like, obviously, normally they don't, well, hopefully they don't abuse people. I know it happens, but he was like the visible representation of this care facility kind of being in charge. When they killed John Lithgow in the end, that to me was these people who had no power reclaiming their power. They reclaimed the power from the structures that suppressed them, and it was more than just stopping the violence that John Lithgow's character was creating. It was really a great movie. And I must say, it did feel like a New Zealand film. And I don't know why. We have a certain style to some of our music and our film and stuff. We have our own vibes. It definitely felt like a New Zealand film, and it was a really great one. I do recommend it. If you've made it through this whole thing and got all my spoilers and we're okay with it, then definitely go and watch it. Maybe rewatch it. Thank you for joining me for my first watch with me kind of a series. I'm definitely going to do this again. I enjoy kind of analyzing stuff like this. I studied anthropology, and so I do tend to think like this, anyways. I really appreciate that you've stuck around to the whole thing. And yeah, like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more. There's definitely going to be more like this. Might do a series where we watch one episode each week or something. I don't know. It's great that it was a New Zealand film, too. They won't all be New Zealand films, but this one was. Thank you. Goodbye.